Weathering with You is the latest feature film from the very humble Makoto Shinkai, who became a global phenomenon when he released Your Name back in 2017. And because of Your Name's success, a lot of people were very hyped about this release. But is Weathering with You a worthy successor to Your Name? That was my first thought as I waited for this movie to start, 30 minutes after its scheduled showtime. So already, I was not in a good mood. But then the film actually started, and the very first 10 seconds shut my dumb ass up with its animation and sound design. And we'll talk about that first, since that's the best aspect of this movie. This movie is a feast for the eyes. I can confidently say that every frame can be a wallpaper. The background environments are drawn so photorealistic, but it never reaches an uncanny valley that it detracts from the hand-drawn anime characters. It feels inviting, like you're actually in Tokyo. Well, not living there because this isn't a vacation, but trying to survive in a congested city in which the sun never comes. Makoto Shinkai highlights the seedy and shady parts of Tokyo, like Kabukicho, a place filled with unfriendly people, and it emphasizes the struggle that this 16-year-old runaway is going through. The environments aren't just there to look pretty, they're a foundation for the story, and that's just the backgrounds. We haven't even mentioned the use of the camera, the use of 3D space to get incredible sweeping shots. The blending of 2D characters with a 3D environment are some of my favorite shots, but you can definitely tell that the 2D hand-drawn animation does have its limitations. This is a nitpick. It doesn't detract from the movie. It's just if I had to improve something in the visual aspect, it would be the 3D CG, specifically the textures on certain models. Not all the 3D CG is iffy. 98% of the CG looks amazing and blends incredibly well with the 2D. But some textures on the buildings look straight out of a PS3 game. Like I said, this is a nitpick. These 3D buildings are background elements. They aren't the star of the show. The rain and water are, and they'll make you wet. Makoto Shinkai is known for rain at this point, and he does not disappoint. The rain is so damn good, I would rather watch rain hitting this boy's face for 10 hours than a single episode of anime this season. Coupled with great sound design of the rushing waters, and my ears will nut in happiness. So yes, this movie needs to be watched in theaters, or a killer home movie setup. So if you haven't seen the movie in theaters, go watch it now. The animation is well worth the price. So now let's talk more in depth about the movie. I think we should address the elephant in the room. Is this better than Your Name? My opinion is no. Is this copying Your Name? It does borrow a lot of elements from Your Name, but it does incorporate some new ideas to create its own identity. So it's not a carbon copy. You can make the argument that it's similar, but I think Weathering with You has a more ambitious plot. So let's talk about it. The basic premise is that there's a boy named Hodaka runs away to Tokyo, and he needs to try to survive because, well, he's an underage minor in the seedy part of Tokyo. He eventually meets a girl named Hina, and she has the ability to manipulate the weather. This is important because Tokyo is always raining, causing a lot of problems. And since Hina can use her powers to move the rain so that the sun can shine through, the two start a business to profit off the various solaires in the world so that they can continue to praise the sun. The film does a great job fleshing out its own lore and answering whatever questions you may have about the plot and character motivations. I was never really confused, and everything made sense in the context of their world. But you do have to suspend your disbelief on certain events to enjoy this film, because if you think about it, some actions that Hodaka makes is really naive and questionable. But the film gripped me with its pacing and editing, so I never really had the time to think about how stupid the situation actually is. The film incorporates a lot of montage, or basically AMVs, using radwimps in order to convey time skips. And if you don't like radwimps, then you'll probably hate this movie, because at some point I was questioning if this was a film or a 2-hour-long music video. Okay, now it's time to talk about spoilers. So I can talk about the stuff that I didn't really like, so skip ahead if you don't want that. I think the most controversial aspect of this film will be the ending. Depending on your worldview, you will either hate this ending or love this ending. Basically, what happens is that Hina's sunshine powers come at a price. You see, Hina's connection to the sky is the reason why Tokyo is constantly in a downpour, and eventually, she'll have to return the powers that she borrowed, which means she will disappear into the sky, bringing back the good weather. Basically, she needs to sacrifice herself to stop climate change. Now, Hodaka does not want that because he loves her. So, he goes after her. And we have this great action set piece that utilizes all the characters that we got to know and love, which is awesome. There is a part that I don't really like, and it's the literal Chekhov's gun. Hodaka needs a gun. Why? Because he needs to be able to defend himself, otherwise the adults could easily overpower him. And the film tries to justify why there is a gun in the first place, but still, finding a loaded gun in a trash can is probably the most contrived plot device in this film. I mean, the chances are not impossible, but it's so lazy. Now, the way they incorporate the Chekhov's gun at the end was really good, but I wish Hodaka acquiring the gun was a natural progression instead of just rolling gold at a gacha game. But I don't think that's the biggest problem that most people will have in this film. Hodaka makes a choice. He decides to save Hina, but he ends up dooming Tokyo. Because he saves Hina, the sun will never come, and so rain continues to pour and Tokyo is flooded. Now, this is why I said that your worldview will determine your feelings about the ending. If you're the type of person who believes in self-sacrifice for the greater good, then Hodaka's actions are detestable and ultimately selfish. And that was my first thought when I walked out of the theater. This boy probably ruined lives and killed many just to save one girl. He ultimately doomed society because he was in love. And the epilogue does not help, and it's probably the weakest part of this film. It tries to justify Hodaka's actions as a good thing, and it sweeps all consequences under the rug. It ends like Your Name, but it really shouldn't have. The film should have ended as the two were falling out of the sky, holding hands, and the future would be left up to interpretation. Whether they doomed society, or they just fucking died from falling from that high. It could be whatever you want. After all, endings are either satisfying or thought-provoking. Your Name was satisfying. And Weathering for You tried to do both, but it should have stuck with thought-provoking. And I think if you cut out the epilogue, Weathering for You has a much better ending. Reason being is that Hodaka is not Jesus. He is a 16-year-old kid who has only experienced true happiness by being with Hina. He had a trolley problem, and he chose to save his love over millions, which is pretty much in character for him to do so, and if you don't like it, then you're not wrong. He is the literal definition of a spoiled brat. But even so, I can kind of relate to him. Like, why should I make the world happy if it doesn't make me happy? Its basic message is that you should be selfish. It's okay to be selfish. It doesn't matter what happens. If this makes you happy, then go for it. Now, that kind of message can be problematic, which is why the film has a lot of confusing themes, especially if you believe this film is about climate change. And the film is clearly inspired by the idea of it. But in the film, the climate has changed for the worst, and the people just have to deal with it. There is no solution. People aren't actively trying to fix this problem. In fact, most of the population decide to hire Hina for a short-term solution of taking the rain and push it somewhere else. And I think Shinkai's message is that we can't fix climate change. We fucked up. And now this is the world that the kids need to adapt and live in. But that's not the only environment that Shinkai is criticizing. And I don't live in Japan, so I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems like Shinkai is showing a more incompetent Japan and criticizing it. He highlights the red light district, the Yakuza. There's a scene where the police question this Yakuza member who indirectly admits to coercing girls to prostitute themselves, some underage. That seems like a serious crime, but cops only seem to care about Hodaka owning an illegal gun. And Hina's entire character is a social worker's nightmare. Now, these could be seen as plot holes, or you could see these as an example on how flawed Japan actually is. But there's too many conflicting messages that it becomes indecisive. You can't have all these serious themes and have it end like a fairy tale. Hodaka made a choice, and it was the correct choice for him, but he needs to face the reality that his choices will have consequences, which is why the epilogue is a cop-out. You can't underplay a natural disaster. If you remove the McDonald's Happy Meal epilogue, then you'll have a solid film about making sacrifices to be with the person you love, to be selfish and to live for yourself. It's a message that might not be morally correct, but it's something you do need to hear at some point in your life. So yeah, I kinda got a lot out of this film. Its message might be a little confusing, and it might not be the right message to some people, but overall, I think the film was solid, and if I had to rate it, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I like this movie. It's beautiful, but unfortunately, I do have to compare it to Your Name, and Your Name is just better put together. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to my review and my opinion. Leave a like, comment what you think about this movie, you can subscribe if you'd like, but this channel is mainly satire and memes. That's why it's called an actual review, because these videos are only made for special occasions. Rest of the time, I fucking hate anime. Okay, bye!